All right, welcome back. Welcome back. We figured out the tech issues. Yes, welcome back. You are what have arrived to legally everywhere where we are what? We are legally everywhere, everything. Woo! And when I tell you I got a receipt for you guys, get my notes from my phone. Let me pull this out real quick. Oh, I have a receipt for you this evening. I have a lovely treat. I have a lovely treat for you this evening. And yeah, we're going to get right into this because this is such an interesting setup here. Let me pull my slides up. Do you see everything? Okay. Give everyone a few minutes. I know a few people said they were going to hop back on. And I want to go ahead and allow that space. Okay. Just a couple of moments. I've checked the mic. The mic appears to be good. The internal mic seems to be good, so we can go ahead and jump back in. Like I said, this is legally everywhere. We are what? We are legally everywhere, looking into everything. And tonight we're going to do a real world contract literacy breakdown. This is not legal advice. I do not give legal advice. What we do is literacy breakdowns. We do legal analysis here, but we don't do legal advice, okay? So this is just for educational purposes, as you see indicated right here on the screen, okay? So I was lucky enough to be able to pull some of these receipts for some gossip sites, but this is not a gossip location. This is not where you're going to get gossip. What you will get is receipts, which will be framed through a legal lens. And we're going to actually do some comparative analysis. We get to look at common law and civil law and how would they respond to this conversation of breach, right? This Kash Doll versus the promoter conversation. And this has been all over the internet. I mean, it's been a lot of discussion. It's been a lot of emotions. It's been a lot of things going on. But what we want to do, we want to dive into the receipts because the receipts are always juicy. Receipts are always juicy and succulent enough just on their own without adding any emotional spice to it. And we're gonna dive in. You ready? Because what I told you here on the receipt buffet was that you will be nourished and that every time I provide you with something, we're going to be trying to provide things that people can enjoy. That you will leave the buffet nourished. Everyone comes and gets different things, but I can assure you, regardless of your plate looking different than the next person, you're going to learn some really amazing things on this site, or better yet, on this channel. And we're going to jump right on into it. You guys ready? Let us jump right into it. Okay, so to keep it kind of simplified, I put certain things on the screen so y'all have y'all receipts because y'all know I'm big on y'all being able to have receipts. What actually happened, okay? So Kash Doll, known as a native of Detroit, a rapper who has grown since then from not just being a Detroit local rapper, but just being a well-known industry person. She was booked for a Detroit event, right? She was booked for a Detroit event. The promoter publicly claimed that she breached the event. We have that receipt, okay? Kash Doll responded saying payment was not made, and we have that receipt as a response was to what he was saying, and then a couple of community things or statements that were out there. So we have his Instagram post as what a receipt. And so that was her response. Her response was that they didn't pay her. Didn't run her money, right? So and the contract was never finalized. That's her position. Later that same night, relevant to the event booking, right? She appeared at another event that same exact night by a different promoter, different location, right? Which sparked a lot of discussion. Okay, so I also have a little bit of the discussion that was had. I captured that from the Jasmine brand. So I would say 2 of the receipts at least come directly from the Jasmine brand. Feel free to go check out their social media accounts. They are, like a blogger. So feel free to get some of your information there if that's what you would like to do. Y'all know I do not gatekeep sources. So go ahead and indulge if you feel like you need to. But know that in this particular space, we're looking at everything through the lens of law. Specifically today's focus is contract law, and then we will dive a little bit deeper as we analyze contract law versus civil law. And how might those 2 separate legal structures look at this particular incident? Because people have been buzzing, and baby, when it got local, I had to get in. I had to get in and look at some stuff. So what did I do? I grabbed my receipts. I started annotating. I marinated a little bit, which is why we're a couple days past the time frame that's been occurred. And oh yeah, now we ready to talk. Ooh, and baby, we gonna talk. So now y'all have a little bit of a foundation as to what actually happened, because that's a big part. What happened, right? That she wasn't paid. And she said, you didn't even actually have like an agreement, right? She said, better yet, they had an agreement, but it wasn't finalized, so you don't technically have an agreement. And then she went somewhere else because she's free to do so. That's what's being said. Now let's see what these receipts are saying. This is the actual contract, because before we talk about contract law, right? So we need to look at the contract. Sounds fair? Well, guess what? The lovely promoter, we pulled this receipt from Jasmine Brand. The lovely promoter went ahead and produced that information. We have a sip of water. The promoter indicated in this corner right here, don't blame me. Kash Doll broke our contract. I will see her in court. So y'all, they didn't exist. And they like to seek damages. The only way that you can get damages is if you can prove that the other person was at fault. So in this case, he would need to prove that Kash Doll breached the contract. So let's look at this contract. It says November 29, 2025. No Detroit performance before, after the performance. So that's their Instagram. We can see I feel post and 2-story post. Okay, my apologies. That reads 1 feed post and 2-story post. So that was a part of the agreement. It says 11:59 a.m. showtime. Interesting, right? I'm pretty certain that piece right there looked like a typo. I don't think they will want that time frame. I'm thinking maybe they meant to put PM. That's my assumption, right? Cause who partying like that up in the morning right before noon? That's like brunch time. I'm thinking that piece is a typo already, but it says a 40-minute performance. Okay, so she was paid, or better yet, $45,000 all in, writers attached. Okay, this is what we can read. This is what we see. So this is what y'all. I told you I was bringing receipts. So $45K, right? $45K, 45 bands, however you say it, wherever you from. 40-minute show. No Detroit appearance 1 week before the event in Detroit, right? This contract says nothing about the same day appearances, which is a point of discussion that has been referenced, is her going to the Monica and Brandy event immediately following their communication or miscommunications, right? Their contract change or whatever, right? So there is a point of discussion about what this event that she went to that was the same day. But there's nothing in this contract that states she can't do something the same day. Additionally, the contract speaks, what the contract does speak to, rather, is that there was to be no performance in Detroit 1 week before, 1 week after. Nothing about the same day. Now, that's a problem, and only for this purpose, right? When it's not stated in common law structure, a little bit more into that. But because they didn't state what time frame in which they were going to pay her, you have to base it off of what's the industry standard. What's the general standard when it comes to, your governing place, right? And in common law structure, we're going to dive into it, but that not being in there plays a factor as well. So we got a couple of things that we're going to be expanding on as we move throughout this presentation here. This 1 week before or after, right? The same, and based off of look. We gotta look. It's getting succulent. We must also kind of really look at the question and frame it the correct way, right? Because a lot of times people say, hey, did she breach? Did she breach? The question really wouldn't be like, did she breach, right? The question is who breached first, because that's how the law is actually structured. It's not about, oh, did you do this, did you do that? And what sequence did it occur? Like, what was the structure? What was the structural setup as to how this actually happened, right? So under contract law, the first party to materially breach loses enforcement rights, right? So sequence matters. Sequence always matters. Always. So the central question becomes, did the promoter breach first by not paying? Or did Kash Doll breach first by not performing? The answer depends entirely on what? It depends on the sequence of events. The sequence matters so much more than the drama, although the drama, from what I read, seems like succulent if you're into such activities, into such things. Actuality and the receipts that we can find. How's the law looking at things? But the story seems very interesting. So let's dive into the common law, right? Because that's what I said I was going to bring y'all here for. So what's interesting is most of the United States, including Michigan, which is where this occurred, Detroit, Michigan, follow common law principles, right? So like under common law, courts interpret ambiguous terms, right? Because we didn't put, when are you actually getting paid? Not put on there, right? So the courts interpret ambiguous terms. Industry customs fill in missing details, right? So whatever standard in that industry, which would be entertainment, that's what's going to fill it in. And when it comes to common law, it must also be understood that the first material breach rules apply. So it's the first material breach rule applies. We will dive into that next, right? For performers, the standard custom is payment must be made before the performer takes the stage. Now, in my personal experience with this, usually they at least say, okay, with somebody of her caliber, I imagine you got to bring the money up front. But even in situations where people maybe are not as further along in their entertainment business life, right? They would still say you got to give me half the money up front, right? Like a deposit. Some people have deposits. And better yet, you give me the remaining after service has been rendered. That's pretty standard in most places, right? At least from my experience being someone predominantly based in Michigan. Payment first, service next, right? So the performer in standard situations and standard custom that payment must. We got that foundation. We've already is a failure serious money. A material breach is a failure serious enough to excuse the other side from come back to that, because later on we'll see there actually was another term that probably could have been wiggled in there that I didn't hear mentioned, but it sounded like it was some wiggle room. We're gonna always stick to what's actually being discussed, but we always gonna, if there's some extra little dibble dabbles, little snacks and what have you, little appetizers we can play with, we're gonna do it for the sake of discussion, right? Because this is civic literacy. This is kind of just breaking down laws and rules that we lived in and lived with through. So and it's helpful when we can look at current events and kind of look how does it line up. So with the material breach, right? We're going to do an example. So if payment is expected before performance and it doesn't happen, that is a material breach by the promoter, right? So if it's expected, that's your anticipation. You're going to rent me my money, then I'm going to go ahead and do the show. And it doesn't happen, that's considered a material breach, because why it's a failure serious enough to excuse the other side from performing. Okay. So once that a breach occurs, you have to keep them to engage in, said performance. So this is where it also gets interesting, because this also comes into play. Payment before the performance. Just basically putting it like that. In many entertainment contracts, payment is a condition precedent, right? This must be done before action is carried out, meaning the obligation to perform only activates after payment is made. What? After you what? You run me my money. She got a whole song, run me my money. And then guess what happened? Child, no payment in this structure, right, with conditions precedent equals no duty to perform. No duty to perform. This is supported by case law and standard performance industry practice. Okay, right? So now we got two separate elements kind of working in tandem in accord, right? So then I'm always going to say, let's look at a little bit more, because I'm curious. If we put this in a different legal structure, we put this in a different legal system, if we put this in a different legal system, right, would the outcome change? Right? Would the outcome change? Now, both of these, in my understanding, are two Detroit natives, so the rules would still apply. But nevertheless, even if they weren't Detroit natives, we know they're specifically based in Michigan, the rules still apply. But I am curious. I'm curious. Let's think, like, if we kind of say, let's look at civil law, like what they got going on. Would it work? Okay. So we're gonna dive in, because that's where this really gets sirloin steak situation, right? Because even in civil law systems like Quebec, right? We can go Canada or parts of Europe. Mutual obligation must follow an order, right? The creditor performs first, right? That means the promoter must fulfill their obligation before the performer's duty kicks in, right? So if I want something from you, I got to run you your money. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead and run me that. Give me the performance. Give me the presentation, the service, the whatever. Render the service after I produce what? The money. Money first, service after. So across both law structures that we're discussing, both common law and civil law traditions, the sequence stays the same, irregardless, which is very interesting to me. The bottom line is that it triggers that process, right? And the sequence matters. But once again, I just want to dive in a little bit more, right? Louisiana. They have a little bit of that civil law flavor. And that's when obligations are reciprocal. The paying party must perform first. Framework still brings us back to the payment triggers, the action, right? So the payment has to trigger the service. I don't expect you to do something for me if I haven't compensated you for what the thing I want you to do, right? So if I want you to perform for me, what you're going to do? You have to run me my money. So this is the promoter's own words, right? So this came from Jasmine B, the promoter's own words. Now she don't lie to talk about I had a problem paying her friend when they all got paid. That's the only way they would get out the band. And they was only there for like 10 minutes. So that was the only way they would get out the band. They was only there for 10 minutes. So she didn't just skip out, right? Because when we pull up on her, right? She didn't even show up as the impression that was given. But this is proven that she was actually on site and that she was requesting to be paid. She waited to be paid. So promoters says payment wasn't ready. Because you got money wasn't prepared. You don't have permit, right? That's essentially him acknowledging that he hadn't made the payment. By the time she got to her car and was waiting in the car, she had not been paid. This confirms the condition precedent wasn't met quite a bit. It wasn't met, which legally means her performance duty has not yet begun. Why? Because she wasn't paid. So it didn't initiate her getting to perform. Why? Because you ain't run her what? You didn't run her money. And for those who are not like the Detroit area, just run me my money is just a very common saying for bring me, pay me my money, pay me what is owed. But yes, I know I have viewers that are not US bound. So just as a point of reference, it's very typical statement in Michigan. So that's why I keep referring back to it, because also the artist that we are referencing, Kash Doll, has a whole song where she talked about that in great length. So just to add that clarification out there. Speaking of Kash Doll, right? Instagram live. Okay, so you heard it here first, baby. She explained to herself that she also indicated something that might qualify as a material breach, because she talked about very cold conditions, saying they didn't have temperature might be a reason. But you heard it here. So this is just a receipt that I pulled off of Jazz Brand. You can look it up. Her first primary source, so no reason to dive too deep into what the secondary source said. But essentially, it notes that she stated she was present and ready to perform an expected payment as agreed upon, right? So contract analysis to show she left because that's not just. So this is one of those pieces where it talked about the overall impact of like how people in the community were responding to things. I'm gonna go back just one. Where this person said, I like Kash Doll, but it seems like in discussion, the action that she actually took, there's no actual contract because it wasn't finalized according to her language, right? Other versions of looking at that receipt, we are a video, so we don't need to dive back in that, but we just kind of jump back to elements, which is if payment wasn't, and we see applied the legal doctrines, kind of that paying party performs first, right? The person who's paying is the one who performs first. The Louis follows the same rule, right? The promoter admitted payment wasn't made on their own post. Kash Doll statement asserts readiness. So she was ready to go. She said she needed to be paid. The first material breach would be non-payment. And once a promoter breaches first, the performer is excused. Once a promoter breaches first, the performer is what? Excused. And with that being said, y'all, let's our little takeaways, right? Does the contract say? What does the industry custom require? And who breached first is legally everywhere. Looking into everything. We are to everything. We are getting our receipts. We are letting it marinate after we have annotated and we have pulled the receipts. Because baby, this was succulent. Oh, this was such a good one, right? We were able to do some comparative law analysis. We were able to do some current events. We were able to keep it somewhat local. Oh, this was such a fun treat. I can't wait for the next opportunity for us to dive into some legal matters, to offer some civil literacy, to just dump and dive in. This was such a treat. If you enjoy this, feel free to jump onto the channels that I have here. We have what I call playlists, which I call stations. Feel free to jump into any of those 13 stations that are currently available to figure out, what your spice is, what you like, and look in the shorts because I have lots of fun samplers there. Once again, this is Legally Everywhere, where we are what? Legally Everywhere. And thank you. Until next time, enjoy the receipts because they were what? Oh, we eating over here and they were good. It was so good. See you next time.